So we're on our way to Gold Creek today as part of the Citizens Witness for Wildlife.
This is so exciting. We've had our coffee and croissants. We're ready to go.
Are you the official videographer on this flight?
Well, we're going to have 2 video cameras.
So who all was in the plane?
Myself, Eric from Department of Transportation, and Eric, our pilot from Whitehawk. So you can see here Gold Creek coming under the freeway, and you can see these varying, they're not very long bridges, which really, you end up with almost a ditch where the Gold Creek goes through.
Okay, here we are just off of Interstate 90. Right behind us is the Gold Creek corridor, right coming through that valley. And if you look, this is the interstate. We're standing on Interstate 90. So we're standing right in the middle of this corridor.
Wildlife corridors is just a fancy term for the idea of connecting 2 places, 2 habitats. It's a way for animals to move back and forth.
Wildlife needs to be able to move around.
So kind of like you moving from your living room to your kitchen.
They move to get out of the cold, and they go to warmer areas in the wintertime. They go to places where there's food, and they use it for breeding.
Sometimes there's 2 different ways, or a hallway that you can get there in. We're just protecting the hallways.
We need to make sure that they can move across I-90. That's going to keep one large, resilient population of that species, rather than 2 smaller populations that are much more vulnerable to disease or habitat changes, and then they blink out.
So Conservation Northwest, our mission is to protect and connect wildlife and their habitats here in the Northwest. And so Gold Creek came to mind as an obvious place where we're able to tell that story.
What we're hoping to get out of this hike and this flight is to be able to tell a story of one corridor, the I-90 corridor at Gold Creek.
When we took our flight, Jen was down on the trail, and we're flying a couple thousand feet above her, seeing the landscape in 2 different ways. You can see how it all fits together. It's very important for people to understand why this habitat is so important, why these corridors are important.
This summer, the construction started on the first wildlife underpass that's going to be a part of this larger I-90 project that goes for 15 miles. There's construction underway for an underpass that's moving from a pretty small area to an 800-foot bridge that's going to move not only the waterway again, but the wildlife are going to be able to walk underneath that freeway. The I-90 corridor, it's one of the most significant corridors in Washington State. Everything moving north and south in the Cascades from Canada to Oregon is going to need to move up and down the spine of the Cascades.
We have development pushing in from both sides, from east and west. This is the bottleneck in the Cascades. The narrowest part is right at I-90. You can see here, from here on up to the pass, this is all development. You can see all of the cabins here. You have maintenance yards here. You even have sewage lagoons here. There's a lot of impact here, which puts a lot of pressure on this Gold Creek corridor to provide for wildlife in the area.
There's proof that these work. And I find a bit of hope in Banff in Canada. They actually have shots of grizzlies going over the wildlife crossing structures. And I think our job is to do what we can to start restoring the habitat, to make the approaches to the interstate as natural as possible.
Now we actually have wildlife cameras in this forest right here and over here.
This is a good experience for me. If I can use this, anyone can. What kind of lure are you using, Jen?
Silent partner. That stinks pretty bad.
We train volunteers on getting out on the ground and actually helping us and scientists monitor wildlife. Recording baseline information about what species are present makes an obvious case for the idea that wildlife are moving through here.
It could be a bear. Just like a small bear, maybe?
People were surprised we had the kind of wildlife we do out there. And there's a certain thing of loving a landscape but understanding that it's alive at the same time. There's a reason we're protecting it beyond just the notion that it's beautiful. And that's something citizens have really been able to grab onto.
We're standing here at the future Gold Creek underpass. We just ran into Patty Gavidota from the Forest Service.
This is very unusual and a very unique situation.
Just basically, this is the only place we can link this type of habitat.
This coalition came together, but it started out as a lot of highway projects do, with the environmental community and the Department of Transportation butting heads. And in the end, because we got this coalition together, the scientists, the environmental community, the agencies, Forest Service, and the Department of Transportation, you ended up with a much better design, and it got built a lot sooner. It's ahead of schedule, but each one of them had to take a risk.
This is a moment where we get to tell a story of what a community did to start protecting a corridor, and maybe out of this we come with new solutions and new communities that are starting to see some of these threats we're facing.
This is not the end of the wildlife overpass issue. There's lots more that needs to be done. At the north end of the lake at Gold Creek and the south end of the lake at Rock Knob, those are two very critical places to have major wildlife connectivity structures. We've got the funding to do the first one. We don't have the funding yet to do the second one. There's lots of things that people can be doing out there and volunteering their time and really making a difference. That means people contacting their legislators, and there's a lot of restoration work that needs to go on.
I-90, the story isn't done. And the story and us and our work at I-90 is only as good as people keeping to engage in the story, people getting on the ground, seeing this place and talking about this place, telling the story and what the success was. So we do actually move across the state and replicate the success here. You talk about Highway 2 at Stevens Pass, Highway 20 further north Cascades, but this is really step one.
Okay, now we're down at Rock Knob. This is one of my favorite places. This is where the first wildlife overpass on Interstate 90 is going to be. If we can get some funding, this could be in the Guinness Book of Records.
We can have this same shot with a bridge over it
Yeah,
in 5 years.
absolutely.
Yeah, you'll have to do the flying.
I'll have to
I
do
don't
it on
like
the
the
fly.
little
I'm
plane.
sorry, it's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it.
I'll hike.